Europe. I mean, it was the most black city in Europe in the 16th century. The reason is because Portugal was the first of the kingdoms in the world that started with the transatlantic trade. And all this story started from the 15th century. In the 15th century, around 1415, Portuguese will start with the expeditions. And this expedition was founded by a prince called Henry the Navigator. So when this started, Portuguese are going to explore the African coast and also the Asian coast and also others. But once they'll be in Africa, since the first goal, like the first reason why they were going to the other side of the world was the financial crisis, they wanted to bring like some goods to Europe, some goods to Portugal. And they're going to find some of them like gold, like seal oil, but they also want to please Prince Henry the Navigator. So they were on the west coast in 1441. There was a navigator called Gonçalves Antão. Gonçalves was on the west coast with the crew, and they have the goods they want to bring back to Portugal, but they won't travel right away. They will decide to bring enslaved to the prince because they want to please the prince. So they're going to make a raid, the first one on the west coast, and they kidnap a couple, a man and a woman who were bearers. At the same time, there was another navigator called Nuno Cristão, younger than Gonçalves Antão, and he wanted to, older than Gonçalves Antão, sorry. So he wanted to be like, like the youngest one. The youngest one was coming, so me too, I have to do something. I have to bring something to the prince. And he also decided with the whole crew to make a raid, and they're going to kidnap dozens of people. So this will be the first people enslaved from the west coast of Africa, and we say from the whole continent coming to Portugal. So they'll be brought to Portugal and given to Prince Henry as a gift. But with what we call today the discoveries, or what Portuguese call today the discoveries, there were lands, there were territories that they were occupying. So those territories were important to be developed. So who can develop those lands? And what kind of development? Agriculture, and also mines in some places. So they needed people to work in those places. So those people will be Africans. So that will be why the slave trade is going to take a huge proportion of it. So Portuguese will start the transatlantic trade by taking people from the coast of Africa and sending them to other territories that belong to them. I'm going to ask someone, I can ask you, please. You have the test, you have the document, right? The last page. We have a test that I took from a website. It's called Lisbon, and it's like the last page. So this is about the whole narrative we have today in Portugal regarding the slave trade, regarding the colonial history. Can you read this test, the whole test for us?
A tribute to Portugal's maritime conquests. Portuguese maritime expansion could not go unnoticed in the country's history. There were so many discoveries and conquests made by the Portuguese between 1415 and 1543 that the age of European discoveries not only boosted the search for alternative trade routes in the Mediterranean, but also contributed to advances in nautical technology, cartography, and astronomy, developing the first ships capable of safely navigating the open sea, essentially helping to outline the map of the world as we see it today. Portugal has a glorious past, doesn't it? To immortalize the memory of the times that marked the history of Portuguese maritime expansion and the Portuguese presence around the world, a monument was built that exalts the discoveries and conquests, the Padrão dos Descobrimentos. The Padrão dos Descobrimentos is a modern work of sober style and precious artistic detail. Its shape is that of a stylized caravel, and sculptured around it are some of the greatest navigators and important personalities at the time, such as Vasco da Gama, Pedro Alves Cabral, and the poet Luís Camões. At the top of the monument stands the image of the great promoter of the discoveries, Prince Henry the Navigator, holding a miniature carved caravel and looking out over the Tagus, invoking the will to explore the new world. At the
discoveries. We all agree that we cannot talk about discovery when people exist, when people were living in a land, when land existed before the Portuguese expeditions. But this word we read everywhere in the Portuguese textbooks relating, when it's connected to these expeditions. So Prince Henry. Henry was very important because, as I said, he founded it. And then when the cargo were arriving, he was receiving 1/5 of the whole cargo. So that's part of what was coming for the royal family. And the city he was living is Lagos. So when those enslaved were taken from the coast of Africa, they were sent to Lagos. First, because Lagos was the main port of the kingdom. And in Lagos, you see most of the rich people of the kingdom. Yeah? So they will be sending all those enslaved there, but other cities of the kingdom were also provided, like Lisbon, like Porto, and others. Alentejo region were also provided. But now, in 1444, on the west coast still, a region called Archaeology, Portuguese are going to kidnap the biggest group of enslaved and send them to Lagos, again, Lagos. And that was in 1444, August 7th. On August 8th, we're going to have the first transaction of enslaved in the city of Lagos. 235 people, some of them given to Prince Henry, and the rest of them will be sprayed to other families as well. So this will be like the beginning of the shameful human traffic that will take place from the 15th century until the 19th century. And Portugal at the beginning had the monopoly of the trade. So this means that all the other people from other countries around or other kingdoms around need to come to Portugal and buy the enslaved before sending them to their places. So Lisbon, as the capital city, will be the epicenter of the trade. So you come here, you buy the enslaved, you send them to your place. Yeah? Lagos will start to be the most important city, the port city, when Prince Henry the Navigator died. That was in 1460. And in the 16th century, a king called Manuel I, whose palace was somewhere behind here, would decide to make Lisbon the official port of disembarkation of enslaved. So from that period, not only prior to that period, but from that period, we're going to have a lot of ships on this side of the river, because this is the port. So a lot of ships will come here, and the enslaved first were registered at the custom service. So after being registered at the custom service, they were sent to the house. Largo de São Domingos, that's the name of the square, it's what is written there. São Domingos stands for Dominicans, so this is related to the church. Okay, so this is a Dominican church. Okay, los Dominicanos. It's also called, this square, it's also called the Guinea Embassy. Okay, that was in the 90s, the Guinea Embassy, because when the Colonial War started in the Portuguese former colonies, many of those people, like from Guinea-Bissau, from the West Coast, were coming to Portugal as refugees somehow. So since they have no real condition of life in the city, they usually gather here. So they brought like sort of solidarity, or there was a kind of union here. So they were helping each other for like job, for accommodation, for even like documents, trafficking documents. So it was like a kind of embassy. So that's why they call it the Guinea Embassy. But Guinea is also related to the Guinea coast, okay, the west coast. So today you'll find some of those first people that came, they're still alive. They are in their 70s. So some of them still come here every single day. And when you go up here, you have some shops, African shops, and where we usually buy our goods. If you have time, we go there. But if you don't have it, I'm going to skip it. So, this church, so Catholic, enslaved from their regions, from their culture, from their religion, taken out, from their regions and arriving to Portugal. So you black, you were enslaved, you were practicing voodoo. But once you are taken as an enslaved, you have to be converted. So you became Catholic. The first thing, of course, you are baptized. And once you're baptized, your name changed. So you have a name, a Portuguese name given by your master, or you have your master's name, or he give you another name. Your dress code will change. So here, when the enslaved arrived, they were provided those clothes. Like, you know, the master is the one who provided the clothes. So they were dressed as Portuguese. And the language. So the only language spoken here is Portuguese. So you leave your Yoruba language, you leave your Swahili, you leave your Twi language, you leave your Ewe language, and the only one you can speak here is Portuguese, and that was mandatory for everyone. So this is what was called the Portugalization of enslaved. Now you become Catholic, you have the service, Sundays or other days, and your master is going to the service. You won't stay home, you go to the service too. So if there is any celebration in the city that is related to the church, you are part of the celebration as well. So this is how all the enslaved black people or other people also will be enrolled in Christianity in Portugal. But in the Catholic Church, there are some institutions that are created. Still exist in some today. They were called the fraternities. You know, we have different kind of fraternities today. You have the Freemasons, so we have, these are not the same, okay? So we have fraternities created in the Catholic Church. In the beginning, we have one that was in Germany. They started from Germany. And then they're also going to start creating some in the churches in Portugal. So in this church, there was a fraternity called the Lady of the Rosary. It was based on the name of the saint of the church. So the Lady of the Rosary, the fraternity of Our Lady of the Rosary. Once this was created, since we have a mixed population, okay, we have white and black enslaved masters, they're going to allow black people, enslaved or some of them free, to join the fraternity. So it's not going to be only white, but it's going to be mixed. So black and white in the same fraternity. But the fraternity, when you take the name, it's like we all together, we brothers in the same institution. But yeah, when you think a little bit, it's going to be difficult to consider a master and an enslaved brothers. In a brotherhood, you help each other. Masters are not going to help enslaved. So this kind of thing is going to start creating some, some problems, not between blacks and whites, but between masters and the institution, and the church. But it's going to be, this problem are going to increase more when the church and the crown will start giving to black people some privileges. I don't know why they gave them those privileges, but the problem is going to be more and more because black people, especially those who were enslaved in the fraternity, will start having these privileges. Like one of them would be like to have a financial autonomy. So if an enslaved is having a financial autonomy, that means there is a possibility to have what? Freedom. So you can buy your freedom later. So it's going to be like a huge issue. How is it going to be? If those people started to have the freedom, so that means I'm going to lose. I mean, I invested in the enslaved and I'm going to lose it. So this is where the problem will start being increased in the city between white masters and the institution. So it's not going to stop. In the year 1526, there was a possibility for enslaved, for members of the fraternity to buy the freedom of other brothers. Yeah? So the danger that was haunting the masters will be a reality from 1526. So how are we going to deal with this now? We cannot we cannot decide because the fraternity was backed by the institution. So we masters, what can be our decision? So they would decide to split the fraternity. Instead of having black and white in the same, it's gonna be separated. So blacks will be in one fraternity and white people will be in their fraternity. So white will keep the original name, the Fraternity of Our Lady of the Rosary, and the black one will be called the Fraternity of Our Lady of the Rosary of Black Men. So this will be the first black fraternity that was created in Portugal. That was in this church. Yeah? So those fraternities are going to have a long life, I would say, but some will disappear, like in the 19th century. Mainly in the 19th century, they all disappeared. And there will be new ones also created later in the 17th, 18th century. So every church in the city had a fraternity. And you are going to have a black fraternity. The name would change just because of the saints that is in that church. Okay, so you see all of them of descent of black men, descent of black men, descent of black men. Yeah? So, I'm just going to show you like one of the very last fraternities in the city that was called Corpus Deus, so the body of God, something like that. So when you're a member of the fraternity, you have a uniform. You have a uniform, and yeah, most of enslaved, most of black people, you know, have this musical skill. So this law was called the law of the custom service, the port. Okay, the law about the court, the port. It said that there is many significant inconveniences resulting from the excess and debauchery with such an extraordinary number of black slaves being transported annually from Africa, Asia, and America to the kingdom, going against the law of some courts. Such enslaved were greatly needed in the overseas domains to work in mines and plantations. And should they come to the continent, Portugal, they were taking the place of young serving men, yeah, who will become jobless and indulge in idleness. That was the beginning of the law. So basically, Portugal stopped to bring new enslaved to the kingdom. But Portugal didn't stop the trade. So the new enslaved were not supposed to come here anymore. Why? Because they are not really needed here. Why are they using the enslaved for hard work? Where are the hard work? And since we spoke about like the plantation a few years ago, so the plantation is the place where they have this hard work. The mines are the places where they have this hard work. Do they need to bring enslaved to Portugal where they don't really need them? No. They don't need them in Portugal because enslaved people are producing, they are producing wealth for the kingdom. But the wealth of Portugal is not in Portugal. The wealth of Portugal is in the colonies. So we have to bring the enslaved to the colonies where they're going to work in mining plantations. So by doing that, we're protecting the work of young serving men who are in the kingdom. So if people still continue bringing enslaved here, the few jobs we have in the kingdom will be occupied by the enslaved. And the young serving men, our children, won't have a job. But when they have no job, when you have no job, you are exposed to like any kind of vicious life, right? So you become idle, of course, and becoming idle, you'll be like, you become a prostitute, you become addicted to drugs, you become drunk, right? So these are the consequences, the natural consequences of idleness. So they're going to protect the few jobs they have in the kingdom to Portuguese. So the law was passed in 1761, September 19, because they want to protect Portuguese, but they want to create wealth from the colonies. So they're going to send enslaved no more to Portugal, but still continue doing the same to the colonies. Yeah? So this is the law. And this is the one used today by a lot of Portuguese as an abolishment law. How about enslaved who were still in Portugal? Did the law set him free, those people? No. The law only set free those who may arrive, who may cross the custom, who may come inside. But there are very few. But those who were living in the kingdom were not concerned. They were not freed. There were still transactions within the kingdom until even the 19th century. And in the archive, you find like in many newspapers, and there was one in that time. I don't know if it was like I don't know, to be historian, but when you are aware of the colonial history and you come and see this statue, you know exactly the message. You talk about protection, you talk about evangelization, civilization, you talk about like all the pedophilia stuff in the Catholic Church. She's talking about like at some point the enslavement of indigenous people was not sort of allowed by the Catholic Church, but at the same time the black enslavement was not, was normal. Yeah, so these are all of this we have here. This statue is a colonial statue, that's it. Yeah, the message to the church is all protection is only through the church. Indigenous people have to be Catholic. So if they really want protection, they need to be Catholic. Yeah, so that's it. This man,
and they are.
A lot of Portuguese, you know him very well. Yeah, this priest is known in Portugal. All Portuguese know him because they are taught his sermons in the school. Yeah, so they know about his sermons, they know about the history of this man. But one side of the history. Yeah? Not the one, the other one. Yeah? So Antonio Vieira was a Jesuit priest in Brazil, 17th century, and who was protecting Indians, indigenous people. But we're going to try to, to put the history in the context of the time and see also everything that was on the side of this evangelization or this civilization. Okay? Like a movie. Back in the days, missionaries sent to Africa, sent to Brazil. The goal is to evangelize people by every means. Violence or not, they have to do their mission. So when they got to those places, are they welcome to the places? Many of them not. You arrive, local people would accept you to get into their kingdom, to get into their land, because you are foreigner. So what will happen? Conflicts. They'll fight. Yeah, people will fight for the land where they're living for ages, where their ancestors lived for ages. So they're going to fight for their lands. But since they don't have the sophisticated weapon, and on the other side, missionaries are backed by This is one of the most heaviest part of the tool. Okay, you guys are eating. It's okay. But I will let. No, continue. I can give you 5 more minutes. You eat.
Oh no.
You can lose your appetite. That's why.
Oh, because we're gonna eat.
Wow.
Are we gonna eat now?
Oh, we're
You're
gonna
gonna lose your appetite. I guess what he's gonna explain.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
Okay, right? Okay. When people were enslaved and they brought to Portugal, and they became Catholic, in the Catholic Church you have like some traditions, and tradition related to the death when people died. Okay? And not only the Catholic Church, even we also in our religion, Vodou religion, we have our own tradition. Jewish have their tradition, Muslim have their own tradition, and any other community has its own. So as an enslaved, when you became Catholic and you died, you're supposed to be buried. Like respecting the Catholic religion and Catholic practices. But in some cases, some African people died here, some enslaved died here, and they were not buried. Yeah? And mainly when you have like an epidemic, and you have different victims, you have a lot of victims, white, black, free, enslaved, masters. Black peoples are not respected. Their bodies were not respected. And this was a practice that was from the 15th, 16th century Portugal. And it was normal. Okay? And maybe that's why today we cannot even show you like any black cemetery or a cemetery where enslaved people have been buried. We don't find any. In 2008, in the city of Lagos, that is the first port, there was the city hall planned to build a parking space. Yeah? And they started to dig. And workers would start finding bones. So they were excavating bones. There were a lot of skeletons. So they had to stop the work. And they collected all the skeletons. And they're going to assemble 155. And in some books, they talk about 158. So those people have been assembled, and then they made like the sort of reconstitution of the bodies. And there were a lot of investigations that went around, and it was mainly made by the University of Coimbra in the north, the country of center of the country. And there was an American academic here whose name is James Sweet, who also he made a lot of investigation about Portuguese slave trade, black people in Portugal. And he was here, he also investigated about the bodies. And there is a report he produced, and we're going to read the report. Okay? So I will need someone who can help me to read it. It's just because I'm tired, so. Okay. I always like when somebody volunteers to do that. Okay. You're gonna start it. Oh.
Given their status as slaves, it is not surprising that these 155 individuals were discarded as rebels. Indeed, most of the bodies appear simply to have been thrown into the pit without any regard for how they landed, a practice that was not uncommon in the 16th century Portugal. What should draw your attention, however, is the small details that defined individual skeletons. More than 25% of the skulls showed signs of intentional dental modifications, indicating the likely West African origins of most of the slaves.
Intentional dental modification. So they were related to the west coast of Africa because there were some practices there. People practice, they can remove their teeth just to protect their health. Or some people, and that is we need to verify it, but it's kind of logical. Some people may do it just to avoid being enslaved. Since when you enslave people, the way they check the health of them and the strength of them is their dentition. So some people may have done it because they just want to avoid being captured, because you cannot check, right? So that may be the reason why they were practicing. So when they found those people, they were like, yes. So they came from the West Coast. And it was important because this is the way they can know, we can track the fact that West Coasters were brought, were enslaved by Portugal. And that was the opposite of the enslaved that lived in Portugal before the beginning of the transatlantic trades. And those people who mainly from the north of Africa. So most from the north of Africa. Yeah? Yeah.
At least one was buried with several rings on his fingers and a necklace around his neck. One woman was buried with her recently born infant in her arms, and at least 3 were thrown into the trash heap with their hands and feet bound.
Yes, thank you. Rings, necklaces. In our traditions, I would say Togo and West Coast, if you die, we give you something. We always give a present to the person. And it can be different stuff, like if I love something the most in my life, people will put it in my coffin because they think that I will need it in my way, in my trip. We don't die for nothing in Africa. We die becoming ancestors. We die and we show that you are going to meet the ancestors. So it's like sending a message also to the ancestors. So this is how our practices are. Rings, necklace, pot, anything we give value to. So when they found some of those skeletons, the conclusion is that they were probably transported by other Africans. Okay? They died and they were transported by other Africans who honored their bodies by putting the rings and the necklaces because they understood this tradition. Okay? Some people who were found with their hands and their feet bound. We'll have one example here. This is one of the skeletons with the hands and the feet bound, so still like this. So actually, it was not removed. Okay, the position was exactly the way it is, the way this picture is. So, what happened? Prisoners, we don't know, disease, they died, and they just abandoned their bodies, or they just threw their bodies somewhere. Okay? Where did they find those bones? It's called Valle da Gafaria in the city of Lagos. It's not far from the city, it's the city center, let's say. Today is the city center. Back in the days, it was outside the city center. Yeah? So when you go to Lagos today, you see the wall that surrounded the city. So everything that was in the wall was the center, and everything outside the wall was sort of outskirts. So today when you go with Today it's called Madragoa. It's close to the French embassy. But they changed the name now. It's Madragoa instead of Mukambu. That was the original name, and coming from Ubuntu language from Angola. And Mukambo means village or hideout. Yeah. So this is how it is. Well, the name changed. That's why I hope this name to be kept here for at least the history won't disappear. And if there are different interpretations, whatever, the name at least says something strong. Yeah, negros, so they were black in the city. Yeah. So Isabel Castro, who is one of the historians here, pointed this street, Travessa do Poço dos Negros, to be the location of the well. But this one, I can show you that. Okay, I can make you sure that it's exactly. Yeah. In the 90s, I mean like in the 60s, 70s, 90s, this whole neighborhood called São Bento was Cape Verdean. Okay. I would say like there were more Cape Verdean than Portuguese, but there were a lot of Cape Verdean here. Yeah. So the first bars, Cape Verdean bars, the restaurants, even the nightclub. There is a nightclub bar called Beleza. Today, called Beleza. It was created here. Yeah. The location is right. The palace where Beleza was is just like in the next street on the left side. It's the one in the corner to the main avenue. So here there were a lot of Cape Verdean. Today we still have some, and one of them is the owner of the restaurant we're going, who came here in 1971. He's an old guy. He still hold the restaurant. The restaurant is new. It's almost 10 years old, but he came here when he migrated from Cape Verde. This is where he lived. Okay, before moving around, going to other countries, but he's back to Portugal. Okay, so we're going to see him. His name is Domingos, and the cook name is Augusta, both from Cape Verde. Okay.
Oh, so good, kashupa.
Yeah, no, I was before I moved to Spain. I've been in the Bay for like 11 years. Yeah, I know. Oh,
Augusto. All right.